Welcome back to another episode of the Acastus Knight Asterius build. In this episode, I am going to be completing the 3 weapons that still need power. So the 2 main weapons that come with the Knight are getting pink chip LEDs from Evan Designs. And they are chip LEDs in the fact that they are chips, not the bulb style, but the size is also a chip LED. And I don't know if that's just the first one, but there's a size bigger and a few sizes smaller. And then I've got my power. And so I prepped 2 little pieces, 4 each, and painted the ends chrome. So, and it's Model Master enamel paint. So, and I just painted them chrome. And it's a good, pretty shiny chrome paint that I'm hoping, once these are assembled, and I won't really be able to get to those parts, will bounce a lot more of the pink light from those LEDs around on the inside of the weapons. Once everything's covered up with the grill covers. So, I think there is going to be quite a bit of just kind of assembly and wiring. There is also the one other weapon from Watcorp. That's the Chaos Knight, the thermal cannon kit. So this one also, is going to get 2 chip LEDs. So there'll be 2 chips mounted back here that will shine through this and come out. I think that goes on the bottom, and come out the front, hopefully nice and bright, looking like this has got basically some internal glow. So we'll see. That should work out. That one should be pretty easy, but that's going to be a bunch of time lapse, and this should all go together pretty easily. I will stop if there's anything that I need to kind of call attention to, or feel like I should call attention to. So this is probably going to be a couple days worth, I'm not sure exactly. But yeah, so this is going to be a lot of time lapse. All right, well, let's get to it. now, while the soldering iron heats up, it was pointed out to me that I may not have used enough flux. The purpose of flux is essentially to clean the metal, I believe. I could be wrong. But I believe it's to clean and allow the solder to flow better. Now, there is solder with flux built in. Isn't necessarily always the best. I did also purchase a new soldering iron that is temperature adjustable. And the little bit of research I did, having never had a temperature adjustable soldering iron before, is that depending on the size of the tip and the size of the joint you're soldering, the temperature needs to be adjusted. So, larger surface area equals higher temperature. So if you're going with a fine tip and have a small area that needs to be soldered, around 250 should be plenty. From what I was reading, right? A bigger tip, like there's a chisel tip, something like that, with maybe a big gauge or a smaller gauge wire, may need a higher temperature. So it comes down to, again, from what I was reading and haven't really done a whole lot of experimenting, is that as you do this, you want to have the soldering iron set essentially as low as possible to get the solder to pull into the joint. So that being said, we'll test a little here. And since it is melting the solder, I don't know. Oh, that might be too hot. So I have it set to about 260. Back it off to about 200. Starting lower is probably smarter. All right, let's see. I think that's way more than enough solder in there. Look really good. I don't know, the new soldering iron. It was a little kit, $20. So I think it actually seems like it's a good little kit, right? I don't know if it's actually temperature controllable. It seems like the lowest temperature is more than enough for what I'm doing. That's not what we want. I think that'll be okay. If I have to, we'll put a piece of tape on it. All right, let's see. Now we turned this down to about 200 earlier, so we'll see if that's still... Well, it definitely seems like that's still hot enough. Alright, and it is just over 200. So this is solid core solder, also not resin core. I think that might make a difference as well. Never had a little soldering setup with the whole little sponge and everything, so I feel like I'm getting pro. Just kidding. It's still a super cheap little soldering iron. Alright. Are pretty ridiculous. Alright, I'm going to not assemble these any further so that they can be painted before any of that shielding covering goes on. So I'll move on to the other custom weapon that I got from Watcorp, the thermal cannon. And we'll just keep going from there, but these are pretty amazing, and I love how that pink pops out of there. So we'll see what they look like once those covers are on. Hopefully you can still really see that light coming through. Once I figured out all those cables, those actually look really cool on there. Those should paint up really well. It actually ties together really neat with the way I did my power lines. I mean, it's definitely not the same, but it all ties together. So, it's pretty cool. Alright, so these are the elements for the thermal cannon kit from Watcorp. So all I have is essentially just pretty much started hollowing out the base to make room here for the power cord, or the plug, I guess. So this should be a pretty straightforward build. I'm going to drill a little hole through here, and then the two red chip LEDs from Evan Designs will get mounted to this so that they project through here. All right, so the upper half of that, because it doesn't actually hit all the way down on the bottom. So the upper half here, and you can kind of see through the bottom at the far end, right, is covered up a bit. So I'll put the two LEDs to the upper 2/3 of that, I suppose. But again, it should actually go together really easily. There'll be a magnet in this one that matches the polarity of the magnet in the other one, so that the two of them can be changeable, interchangeable side to side. So I think that's pretty close, actually. A little more. I do want to make sure, as I go through all of these, and this I think is the last one, that I maintain kind of the idea of the red being on the right side. So I know my little horn spikes there are down. So as long as this goes in with the red wire on the right, I will end up, I think, just painting that horn a bright red, and this a really kind of dull, almost black, washed out red. Just want to centered, but as long as the odd horn sections are down, that means that the right side is red. So everything should hook up and connect and power perfectly. So you have a wire sneaking up here. Just trying to find your... Alright, so just a little bit of work back there to finish that off and putty that in. And that is another really cool weapon ready to go. Alright, other than some minor magnets, and then actually just putting these two, attaching them to their elbow joint, I just got to figure out which one's which and make sure I put them on the correct side. That shouldn't matter too much, but while I was drilling out the inner cavity, there was just a little tiny bit of blowout. And I kind of figure as long as I keep that to the inside of the body, I mean, it's essentially invisible anyway, but if I put it in the right spot, it'll be completely invisible. So I'm just going to make sure those go to the center, and we'll keep going from there. This one actually turned out really cool. All three of these weapons are pretty amazing. So just a little bit more to finish these guys off, and we'll be moving on. Alright, so the last thing to do is actually going to be to mount the two main weapons to their respective shoulder joints. So I think, I'm not sure, it might be tight enough that I can actually just glue inside the joint, that when I put the peg in, it might hold on to that tight enough that it could be posable. If not, it just wants to sag down, because that's, and unless it's quite tight, it's just going to sag forward, because there's going to be a lot more weight on the front half of the pivot than there is on the back half of the pivot, especially since a large part of this got hollowed out. So let's see. Alright, so I ran out to the garage and grabbed a clamp, so that's nice. I believe it'll still even rotate after all this. And then, let's see, take that. Alright, now I want that, in as close to probably the correct position as possible before I clamp it, just in case any of the super glue squeezes out and gets into the overall connection. And if it happens and it ends up being solid, then at least it's in the right spot. All right, now this one really should be set. It's mobile and it's sticky, so the magnet up in the shoulder isn't strong enough to keep it rotated far, but this is actually still posable. Well, so it's gonna fall because the shoulder joint can't hold it, but it's got some movability, and we should make sure we can reach to plug everything in. Oh yeah, that's gonna look super cool. Alright, so without plugging the other one in quite yet, let's go ahead, plug the main power cable into the body. So everything in the carapace working nicely. All the LEDs in the eyes, little skull light, and the really awesome pink LEDs. Where can they see those? Well, they're lit. It's awesome. They're super cool. That's gonna look really cool once this guy's all like standing it together. Alright, so once, well, the other one's probably set. Let's take a look. Super glue sets pretty fast under pressure, so we'll see. Amazing what having both sides connected actually will do, because that feels like it's solid enough that it will also be, at least minimally, posable. So we plug this one in. And everything's happy. Let's turn these off. Alright, I think that's good. I'm trying to adjust the camera exposure to get a good sense for what this actually looks like. And that's really not too bad. There's some ambient light in the room. Tipping over his weapons there. His eyes are great. And those pink weapons. Alright, so this is all going to be painted up Iron Warriors. And so the Iron Warriors plasma weapons for our Iron Warriors army, Mike's Iron Warriors army, those are pink. We went with pink and purple plasma, so this is going to look amazing with the rest of his army. It's going to look absolutely fantastic. So I'm very happy that these stayed slightly posable. Let's adjust our lighting here and turn the exposure back while we adjust lights. Try not to blow up my camera. I think that'll be a good spot when I turn the main light on. So I think it turned out really cool. I really like how the weapons attach. All right, those power cables look great. These are gonna have to be cleaned up still just a little bit. I'm just going to basically clean it up and make it look like, a logical connection. And then the lights here on the back of this vent, or they look like lights or caps, I'm going to make them look lights. One will be painted red and one will be painted basically off. So, right is red. So that'll help the user to plug it in correctly. And the little cap underneath here turned out great. Having the extra little piece on the inside to act as kind of a hinge piece made that so it glued on really nicely. And if there's ever a concern, I can put a little extra piece behind it that would actually hold it really, really well. But it seems to be really solid in there. So all of that, main weapons, main body, all of that is done. I still have to do the simple weapon pack that's going to go on the top. I'll probably just do that off camera because there's not going to be anything special about that. And then there's going to be a whole bunch of painting of all of this before I do armor, and then the armor panels are going to get painted. And somewhere in there, I may possibly be getting a resin printer. So once I get the resin printer, there is going to be a need to create, and this is the gauntlet off of a different, smaller Night and Night Castellan. The gauntlet's actually the same size for this guy, so it's the same as far as reference goes. But this as a connection in here is just not right. It just doesn't fit together correctly. So I'm going to have to create a new elbow piece for this upper arm to transition to the wrist of the new gauntlets. And one of the new gauntlets will be holding, like I said before, a warhammer, and one will be holding a shield. And so those will be kind of their own separate thing. And hopefully as part of all of that, I'll even be doing some like 3ds Max modeling to go along with the resin printing as part of the whole build process. So something to look forward to, hopefully, in the very near future. All right. Thanks for watching.